So we're going to be looking at the colonies of Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay. And this is an example of a paper slide. So this is going to be similar to what I'm going to expect you to be doing in class, although I don't have the illustrations in mind. So the pilgrims. A pilgrim is a person who makes a journey for a religious reason. So they're either trying to find religious freedom or they're trying to help convert other people to their religion. So in 1608, a group of religious farmers tried to start their own church in England. This is the same year that Jamestown is being started, so you can kind of get an idea of where that is on the timeline. The Church of England would not allow those pilgrims to start their own church. So they, of course, were really frustrated by that, and they wanted to move somewhere where they knew that their religious practices would be tolerated. So they went to Holland for their religious freedom. They get to Holland and they realize that the way of life is really different, and they're homesick for their hometowns in England. They miss the culture of England. They wanted to be a part of that English society. So in 1616, they sent men over to England to ask the Virginia Company for a charter. And they wanted to have that charter in order to start the colony in North America. And remember that the Virginia Company was a joint stock company. So a lot of people had ownership in that idea of that colony. So people wanted to know that they could make money. The Virginia Company agreed that this would be a good money-making venture, and the Pilgrims ended up going back to England on the Mayflower and the Speedwell. So they get to England, they get some supplies, and then they load back onto the ships to head to the New World. One of the ships was not a great ship. So all of the Pilgrims ended up crowding onto the Mayflower and set out from Plymouth, England in September of 1620. So there were all of those people that were crammed into that one Mayflower, which is why you hear about the Mayflower when you hear that Thanksgiving story. Crowded onto the Mayflower, there was 101 men, women, and children, and then all of the stuff that they needed to survive. They wanted to head to the lands that were governed by the Virginia Company, which of course was in the southern to middle part of the United States. So the Pilgrims were given that free passage to America, and in honor or for that free passage, the Pilgrims promised that they would send the members of the Virginia Company furs, fish, and lumber in order for those people to make that money, those shareholders to make that money. The Mayflower ended up getting blown off of course by storms, and they eventually finally reached the coast of what is today Massachusetts, so several hundred miles north of where they wanted to be. Pilgrims did not know where they were, but they knew that they were not in Virginia. They knew that this was not the right spot, but they decided they were going to give it a test anywhere because they were out of supplies. They called the new colony Plymouth. So the Mayflower Compact, in order to keep everything kind of in order, the 41 men who were still surviving, agreed that they were going to sign this agreement, this Mayflower Compact. And in that compact, they agreed to make and obey all of the laws of the colony. So this is going to be the first example of government that we see in the New World, or at least that English government. Women were asked to obey those laws, even though they did not actually sign or take part of in that agreement. The first winter, of course, was really, really hard. We know that those Massachusetts winters are cold and not a whole lot of fun. There wasn't enough food. A lot of the settlers got sick because they didn't have the right kinds of food and because it was so cold. And it ended up that about half of the Pilgrims died. Finally, 2 Indians are going to arrive to help out in the spring, and they showed the Pilgrims how to plant those squash, pumpkins, and corn that eventually were going to help them to survive. So Plymouth ended up being successful even after that really rough year of 1620 to 1621. And for the most part, they maintained a really positive relationship with the Native Americans that unfortunately eventually is going to slip away because those Pilgrims wanted to have more and more land in Massachusetts, which means that the Native Americans got kicked off of their land. So I want you to keep all of this in mind for tomorrow's discussion about Plymouth and about Massachusetts Bay, and then we're going to get started on the other 13 colonies. Have a great one.